An Instance of the Fingerpost, very, very interesting book written by a guy named Iain Pears. And the story concerns a murder that took place in Oxford in 1663. It's the murder of a guy, I guess a big shot at Oxford, a churchman, a fellow named Dr. Robert Groves. Ultimately, a woman, Sarah Blundy, is tried for the murder and is ultimately executed. Now, the thing that's interesting about the book is that the same crime is described 4 different times. There are 4 narrators. And the other thing that's interesting about the book is that there are 3 different big themes that seem to cut across all of these. Now, the narrators, the first one is a guy from Venice, a fellow named Marco de Cola, and he's kind of a traveling dilettante. The second guy is a fellow named Jack Prescott, and he seems to be some kind of a graduate student at Oxford who doesn't seem to go to class and certainly doesn't have a job. The third guy is a fellow named Wallace. Wallace I thought was very interesting. He's a mathematician, but more importantly, he's a cryptographer. And then the fourth narrator, the guy who kind of sort of pulls it all together, is a fellow named Wood, and he turns out to be a historian. Now, the thing about each of their stories is that they're all different from one another. They have different views of the crime, and they all have extremely interesting backstories. I thought very interesting backstories. You know, you got the guy from Venice, but then the mathematician and cryptographer, Wallace, you get introduced to how they did 17th century code breaking. I found that very, very interesting. Now, there are, as I said, in addition to having 4 narrators, you have 3 kind of dimensions that set the stage for what's going on here. One is the whole question of science. I mean, what's happening in 1663 or in the 17th century in England is that they're starting to move away from, I'll say, old-fashioned classical understanding of nature by way of Aristotle and philosophy and things like that, and moving into what we really recognize as genuine science. And you see how these guys are fumbling their way through that. The second dimension has to do with politics, particularly the politics during the period when Cromwell ran England, and then into the period when Charles II was restored to the throne. Very, very interesting. I suspect it's all pretty accurate. And then the final dimension is religious. And what you have, of course, is Catholics versus Protestants in the 17th century in England. And De Cola, the Venetian, is a Catholic who gets to see what it looks like from a Catholic point of view. The other guys are all Protestants, all, I guess, Church of England. And the third group, so to speak, in this religious thing is a bunch of what I'm going to call weirdos. They're people who believe that there's another coming of the Messiah, and he's around, or he has come. It's sort of confusing, but it certainly got everybody pretty upset. Anyway, I'm not describing that particularly well, but it's a very interesting picture. I thought an interesting picture of what life or thought or the atmosphere was like in 17th century England. Now, I think it was a pretty good book. I got to point out a few things about it. First, though, number one, it's a long book. It's way over 600 pages long. So it's kind of a commitment when you pick this thing up. The second thing is about it is that it's the third narrator, the guy, the cryptographer, the mathematician, Wallace. That section of the book I thought was really kind of tedious. It took a while to get for me to get through with it, and took some willpower to stay with it. I think on the whole it was worth it because this is a good book. Now, I think if you read the book, The Number of the Rose by Umberto Eco, you'll probably really enjoy this one. I certainly did. I think Iain Pears did a great job with it. And as I say, each of these different narrators, they present their story in a really interesting, very readable way. This book is quite deftly done. So that's my recommendation this week, An Instance of the Fingerpost by Iain Pears. And I'll see you next week.